Welcome everyone to another potentially out of order edition of Drunk Agile, where we're doing this video tonight because of some comments that we received from a previous video. So thank you everyone for whoever posted your comments, about the control chart videos that we've just done. So we haven't decided yet what the exact order is that this is going to be posted. So we're not going to spend too much time on what we're drinking and the update on Nish or whatever. If you haven't seen that, that's probably the next video. I don't know, Prateek, how do we explain it? Or the previous one, yeah, whatever. We're not sure yet, but hopefully you're watching every week, and so you probably know what this is. The one big update is that Prateek did kill his bottle of Glendronach for this one. So, but just know that Nisha and Spartacus are both here at the foot of the bar there for Prateek, who is still in heaven. The comment that we got, the reason we wanted to do this, because obviously we love interaction from our viewers. So the comment we got is, hey, can you show us what a process behavior chart should look like? Answer is yes, we can. We absolutely can. This is going to be a little bit difficult for those of you who just listen to us, as a podcast or aren't actually watching these videos. But
if people want, you can give them a page number.
I could, but that would be too nice. Yeah, here, let me share this because I don't even know what the page number is. Page 96. Look like this is page 96 of my latest book. So this right here, what you're seeing right now, hopefully everybody can see my screen. This right here is a proper process behavior chart. And so Prateek, can you start us off and maybe talk us through some of the elements of this process behavior chart?
First thing, this is a process behavior chart for cycle time. So what you are seeing there, plotted and connected by the line, is cycle time. Each item that was done, how long it took. You're going to see there are two parts to this. There is the individuals chart and the moving range chart. I'm sure Dan's going to get into why there are both of them and what they mean. And also, as every good control chart should have, there is a control limit drawn. Again, Dan's going to get into how that was drawn and all that fun stuff right about now.
Yeah, I don't know how much detail that we'll get into, because I mean we can very, very quickly get bogged down into the math and the justification for these things. But absolutely, the first thing you should know, as Prateek just said, the very first sanity check that you should do if you're really looking at a process behavior chart is it should have two parts. It should have an individuals chart, which is known as an X values chart. And it should have a moving range chart, which is also known as an MR chart. And so that's why you see up here a synonym for process behavior chart is an XMR chart. Though I think the more correct, more generally accepted term is process behavior chart. But if you see XMR chart, that's just as good. The reason that you want, maybe you've seen this individuals chart before. And by the way, this individuals chart is constructed. It is just, we've talked several times about how flow data is time series data. And I don't know, Prateek, I don't know if you can look up which video that was, or maybe off the top of your head, Rain Man. But whenever you have time,
not after two whiskeys.
Whenever you have time series data, then you can just plot that data in order as a running record with time progressing from left to right, and that's all that is here. Every point along this line is a cycle time, an item that has finished, and the cycle time. Like I said, we've plotted them here in time series order. The way that you come up with a moving range chart, and like I said, I don't want to get too deep into this, but it's a function of the difference of successive values in your time series. And there is a mathematical justification for why you do that. Just know at a high level, the reason you do that is because those successive differences is how you're capturing the variation in your process. So this top dashed line here is what's known as an upper natural process limit. It's also known as the 3 sigma limit, as we've talked about in the previous video. And so Prateek, let me hand it over to you. Why is it important to know what the upper natural process limit of our data is?
Yeah, the hint is in the name. Any variation that happens naturally in our process should be within our natural process limit. When we draw these limits, we take into account the variation that's happening in our process, and that makes sure that those 3 sigma line, because this is zero bounded data, and Dan will talk a little bit about why it's what that means here. We only have the upper natural process limit. That 3 sigma line is telling us anything below that line is probably just normal natural variation in our process. Anything that ends up above that line, that is a lot more variation than what is normal or natural for our process. Again, you would expect to see a lower natural process limit as well, but Dan, why don't we see one on this chart?
Yeah, well, I mean, you pretty much explained it. I thought you would go further and just yeah. So the reason for that, and I guess I need to point out one other thing to explain why there is no lower natural process limit. On this particular chart, there is not a lower natural process limit. Is you'll see another line that's drawn that should be drawn on your XMR or PPC chart is this average line. This is one of the few times where average actually can be helpful, because what we're not looking for is, hey, is a point above or below average? I think we've talked about that before many times. Just because you have a point above average or below average doesn't tell you anything. That information, knowing that information, is absolutely meaningless. Where that information becomes meaningful is how far above or below average it is a point. And so the upper natural process limit is a function of your average of your time series. It's going to be, or certainly of your baseline period. In this example, the reason you don't see a lower natural process limit is because that lower, if you were to do the math on this, and like I said, we're not going to get into the math, but if you do the math on this, that lower natural process limit would be negative. And since you cannot have a negative cycle time, then in reality, your lower natural process limit is 0. So, I mean, obviously, if you were to get a cycle time below 0, that's a pretty strong signal that there's something seriously wrong in your process.
Someone brought this up in a class we were doing recently, and they were like, "Yeah, that's negative cycle time. Like I needed this yesterday. Why isn't your cycle time negative?"
Yeah.
Yeah.
So now we have these natural process limits. What do these natural process limits tell us, Prateek? Why should we care?
Yeah, and that's the thing, because these limits are drawn based on the values that you've plotted, and they are drawn taking into consideration the natural variation in your data. One very strong signal, and there are multiple ways to detect signals. There's strong signals and weak signals. One very strong signal that you will receive in your data is if something crosses that natural process limit threshold. If there's an individual that ends up being way above that upper natural, or even slightly above that upper natural process limit, that is a signal that something special or something interesting has happened there. We need to go investigate and find out what this is and deal with it appropriately. It's
Yes,
essentially answering, sorry, I was going to say,
no,
it's
good.
essentially answering the question of how much variation is too much variation.
And that's exactly where I was going to go with it. I mean, remember we mentioned in a previous video that Stewart's goal was to try to understand exactly what Prateek just said. How much variation is too much variation? And he set out to try and draw boundaries around data that could help us to understand, that it could help us segment our data into, what is possible signal versus what is probable noise. And that's exactly this first line that's drawn here, the upper natural process limit, is exactly does that. Any dot above that line um, should be taken fairly seriously as a signal that, you know, a change might be occurring to our process. You know, so something's happening that is out of the ordinary, that is literally extraordinary. That's what that is. Anything under that line is pretty much to be expected. That's just due to the normal operation of the process. And so most likely no action should be taken on stuff below that line. Now, Prateek alluded to, it's possible that you can have some signal below the upper natural process limit. We won't get into that in this video, but that's it. Anything else that we need to know about the individuals chart here, Prateek, before I maybe say some things about the moving range chart?
Well, this one is drawn just to kind of pull this back a little bit. The chart you're seeing is drawn based on cycle time. All flow metrics can be plotted since all of those are time series data. You can plot them on this kind of an XMR chart or this kind of an individuals chart at least, and figure out where those natural process limits are. Whether it's WIP, whether it's cycle time, whether it's age or throughput. This can help you detect when things have potentially gone off the rails, or if your system is changing, or if there's some special condition happening at that point in time.
Yep. So, moving right along, like I said, because we could probably literally spend days on explaining what these charts are, but just wanted to give you a quick overview. So moving right along, going on to the moving range chart. Like I said, maybe you've seen a moving range chart before, maybe you haven't. If you haven't seen a moving range chart, then I will tell you right now, you haven't been looking at a process behavior chart. Most correctly, to call it a process behavior chart, you have to have both of these things. Why? Why do you need a moving range chart as well? Well, there's at least 3 reasons why you need a moving range chart. The first one is if it's not included, then you know whoever drew the chart, or you should be suspicious anyway. You don't know. You should be suspicious anyway that if they haven't included a moving range chart, they probably don't know what a process behavior chart is. They just don't know. So I mean, it's just like if it's there, you've got confidence that they know what they're talking about. If it's not there, you've got at least some suspicion that they don't know what they're talking about. The second reason that you look at the moving range chart, as I mentioned before, is these moving ranges are what captures the variation in your data. So just by, if you know what the mathematics are, and again, we're not going to get into the math. By all means, please go read my book. I go into that math ad nauseum. But if you know what the mathematics are, you can quickly kind of in your head, you know, look at what you're seeing on the moving range chart and look at what you're seeing on the individuals chart and see if they've done those calculations correctly. Because I think, as we mentioned in the previous version, a lot of people like to draw control charts where this upper natural process limit is based on 3 standard deviations of your data. They take the global standard deviation statistic, and it's based on 3 of those standard deviations. Whereas in reality, this upper natural process limit is a function of your moving ranges. So that's another reason that you want to see a moving range chart. And then the final reason that you want to see a moving range chart is it is yet another place where you can potentially detect signal. So you'll see on the moving range chart, there is also an upper line, and anything above this anything above this upper line is again something that potentially should be investigated for signal. Again, I don't know that I want to get too much deeper into that. What else do you have to add about
No,
all?
I was the for me from a pure variability perspective, the moving range chart is a lot more interesting than the individuals chart. I at least for my eye, I see variation a lot better on a moving range chart. In fact, in this data set, and I was trying to eyeball this, I think you see more signal on the moving range chart than you see on the individuals chart. That's kind of, to me, that tells me there is a good amount of variability happening here. Um,
Yep. And
it, yeah.
I was just gonna say, this is a particular team that we are infinitely familiar with, and this is exactly what you would have expected from this team. I'll just say
Yeah.
that. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. What else were you
Yeah.
gonna say?
But this is it's kind of interesting. I know that Dan kind of alluded to this. Um, when you have a lot of variability and that variability is consistent, your process behavior chart will tell you that you don't have any variability. Because that variability is consistent. It means that it's just natural. One of the first times this particular team, we put them into a control chart, it was like, oh, this team looks really stable because they had so much variability that that variability seemed absolutely normal. Um, Digging in a little bit more, we got to results as Dan is showing here.
Yeah, and this gets into the choice of baseline periods and how much data do you need in your baseline period, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, which again, not going to go into this video. Bunch of resources out there if you want to learn a little bit more than that. But to kind of summarize what Prateek was saying, a guy we quote all the time, and we really need to get him on the show. I keep saying, hey, we're going to get him on the show. But Frank Vega, you've heard us talk about Frank Vega, all the time. Frank Vega loves to say when he's talking about the exact situation that Prateek was mentioning, it's like if everything in your process is signal, then it all looks like noise, right? I mean, something like that. I think he says it much more eloquently than that because he usually says it when he's sober. But if all you have is signal, then it will all look like noise. And that's one of the problems of using process behavior charts. First, introducing process behavior charts to teams is they are going to look from a process behavior chart perspective. They are going to look predictable, and technically they are. It's just their upper natural process limit might be months or potentially years, depending on the data.
So, I guess we have talked a lot about this stuff already. I will plug Dan's book once again because if you really want to get in depth into understanding this stuff, especially as it applies to our world, especially as it applies to software development, to flow metrics, Dan's latest book, Actionable Agile Metrics and Predictability, Volume 2, is the definitive guide for that. If you really want to understand control charts, process behavior charts, without an understanding for the context, in our context, I'll go to Dan's book, but without reference to context, I want to go to something written by Dr. Wheeler or Stewart. Dr. Wheeler is a lot more accessible than Dr. Stewart would be. So those are your resources. While this podcast might have been an introduction to this, but highly recommend people to go check those resources out.
Yeah. So I was going to give you the last word, but I think that was
Yeah.
I think that's essentially the last word. To wrap up, I just want to say thank you again to those of you who have written in your comments, giving us suggestions for topics for Drunk Agile. You are our customers, and we want to make our customers as happy as possible. We want to talk about the things that you want to talk about. So please continue to leave us those comments. Tell us what you like, tell us what you don't like, tell us about what other topics you want to hear. So hopefully this scratched that itch for at least some of you. And if not, tell us what will make things better, and we'll try to get that into a future episode. Until then, thank you so much for watching. Thank you. Do you want to show?
Yeah.
She's
She's moving again.
Oh, she's moving.
Yeah.
Hey, Nisha. She's actually looking at us.
Yeah, I know.
Oh,
This contract negotiation, that was part of it.
But I noticed Spartacus has learned really well from Nisha. He's assumed the Nisha position.
He's learned from the best. Learned from the best.
So for Nisha, thank you so much for joining us, Nisha. Prateek, thanks for joining us from heaven. Thanks to all of you for watching, and we will see you in the next episode. Good night, everyone.